on, everybody, and welcome into the Maize and Blue Reviews. Good afternoon, Michigan football. What a weekend, a Michigan Monday after Michigan dispatches Michigan State on Friday, and a game that is still being talked about today after the coaches had their Monday news conferences. And we will get to all of that. Some interesting things coming from Dusty May in Ann Arbor just a couple hours ago. Yours truly was there, taking it all in. And now we're ready to talk about it with you. And hope everybody had a great weekend. If you like college basketball, Friday was great, Saturday was great. And, even Sunday, I was talking with someone today who is just a huge football fan, not a basketball fan. And he looked down when I saw him today, and he said, yeah, boys, if I was a movie producer, I would debut my movies in between the championship game and the Super Bowl. There was nothing on this week. I said, man, you should take up college basketball and hockey. Watch basketball and hockey. There's a lot going on. Yeah, he just loves football. There's nothing wrong with that, that he just loves football. But there's that transition can be difficult for people that really like all of the sports. Now, you had not just the Michigan basketball team beating Michigan State. The women also took part in that. And then you had the hockey team, a real rivalry weekend, taking care of two games against Ohio State down in Columbus. So it was, as weekends go for Michigan winter sports, great. Put it in there is absolutely great. And to me now, what Friday's game means is that Michigan is back to where they were during that 10-game run that they had, where they were a buzzsaw and they were just rolling everyone all the way up all of December. And then at the beginning, the one game against USC, I include that one, and that 10-game run where they look like the best team in the country, where not only did they look like the best team in the country, they looked like they were playing like an all-time great. There was such a long way to go, and it wasn't even into the new year. You had to keep reminding yourself. But game after game, you do that for one game. You say, yeah, they caught fire, lightning in a bottle. Do it for two games. Say, man, they are hot. And, you extend it to 3 games. You say, man, this team is unbelievable. But it was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it just caught everybody up. And let's play the national championship now. And then it ended when they went to Happy Valley to take on Penn State. And then there was a 4 or 5 game sequence. And even though they just lost one game to Wisconsin, they didn't look like the, set aside greatest team of all time. And they looked like one of, they weren't looking like the best team in the country. And I'd say now, Arizona looks really good. I watched them over the weekend take on Arizona State. I've been watching them now. They're up there, and Michigan's up there. You start watching the other teams, and Arizona looks really good. Michigan now, what they did last week, beating Nebraska, and then doing what they did to Michigan State. This is real supercharging. If you're a Michigan basketball fan, it takes you back. This is the feeling. This is how it felt when they were rolling everyone. And it is a coincidence that, it stopped against Penn State. Now they have Penn State coming up Thursday at home. So that's where we're sitting right now as we're ready to talk about these things. The big news today, Dusty May had a few things to say. He was asked a lot of different questions today about the game. And at one point, he was talking, and he mentioned, the mercenary talk towards Michigan. and it wasn't clicking into me that it was Michigan State journalist, media, Michigan State media fans, which is kind of the same thing. You're a fan, you're in the media. Most media are now fans. It works really well for them. And the fans like it. So, give them a pen and give them a microphone and, they'll all, spit out what the coach wants them to hear, what the fans want to hear. But so that wasn't clicking into me. But as the news conference went on, Dusty says, "Hey, you sound like you're a little upset about this mercenary talk where Michigan's just out there, pulling guys out of the transfer portal and trying to win." And he said, "Yeah, he takes it personally. In essence, instead of just bringing in, you could say accuse him if you were, I'll say Michigan State. I didn't read. It's one thing for me. I haven't gone through and read what the green and white, pom pom waivers are, but apparently it's some of this like, oh, they're just buying hired guns. Where on the Michigan State side, it's, oh no, we're nurturing and we're staying with our homegrown players. And, this is the way it's done. Michigan is taking advantage of the system that's, bad in college basketball. Now, depending on what side you're on, you see how people just line up. And if you're a State fan, oh yeah, it is. Oh, it's just such a fatherly figure. And this is kind of what I believe the Spartan media is on. And then on the Michigan side, it's like, hey, you're trying to win. These are the rules, and you can take advantage of them or you could die. And State fans would come back and say, oh, we're not dying. We're getting Tom that second ring before he retires in his 70s. And so a lot of this is, I'd say, almost all of it is just rivalry stuff, but it's good rivalry stuff. That was a exciting game. Michigan looked great. Then they didn't look like so great. Then they played great again. Oh, big time up and down in that game. But in the end, they won and everything. The stuff that little minute details become huge from the fans that watch that. People love talking about the handshake line. Tom Izzo gives it the old cold fish, blow by, sprinting through the line. He wasn't really sprinting, but he kind of a quick handshake. It looked like some of those handshakes between LaFleur and Johnson with the Packers and Bears. No love loss, and these guys weren't coming out, hey, congratulations or well played and good luck. We'll see you for the last game. There's none of that. It was a handshake, and there was, I don't even know, it didn't look like there was any eye contact. It was stuck his hand out, and just kept going, And look, Izzo's a sore loser. And if you're a State fan, you like that. You say, yeah, what do you want him to be? Throwing a party? Or as Izzo put it today, hugging and kissing? No. And he's talked about hugging and kissing this year. He's not down for hugging and kissing. He's trying to win ball games here. So that's where we're at talking about this. And I'll go to a few things. One, Dusty said, they expected to win on Friday, which was good to hear him say that. He said that today. I also saw when he was on ESPN after the game, he said the same thing. He led with that they expected to win. And then he had mentioned today that he liked last year's team. Well, you think about Vlad and Danny Wolf, Area 51. That was a sweet combo. And then I put Dusty on the map or whatever with the bigs. It helped recruit some of the guys that he had this year. But he said that they knew as a staff that they needed more dogs. And if you follow basketball, you know that a dog means good. That means that inside that you're a dog. I've got dogs. They'll eat anything. They're meat. They're dogs. And he said they needed more dogs. And I like how he admitted that, and that they've got him on this year's team. I think the lead dog is Morris Johnson Jr. I mean, he seems like a dog. I didn't even think his nickname. Did they dub him the Junkyard Dog? I believe they have. But Yax doesn't really seem like a dog. More of a silent killer. because he's got an easygoing disposition and he's friendly and he smiles, but he's a hell of a ball player. But, maybe deep down he does have dog in him. But MJJ, he does seem like he's got dog in him. But a couple things that is going to inflame both sides on the U of M Michigan State basketball rivalry is that Dusty said he was proud of his guys because of some of the plays that MSU were involved in cross the line. He was asked about Fears tripping up Yaks, or maybe looking like he tripped up Yaks, and he's like, look like. And that was a dirty play. Now, there's dirty plays happen in college basketball. People are pointing out that, Fears is just a dirty player overall. He's dirty with other teams, not just Michigan State. So he's equal opportunity, hard-nosed / dirty player. Dusty mentioned a lot of plays. He said, look at the tape. Now, I watched the game. I have not gone back and actually didn't record it, rewatch the tape. But just as I was watching it, the dirty plays, I would say Michigan State had 2, and I thought Michigan had 1 that I would classify as dirty plays. Now, there might be a lot more, and you could send those to me, and you could say, well, what about this one? And, so it could be different, but those were the ones that I thought. I'm thinking through it even right now. Mara, it was kind of a rough and tumble situation for him, you could say, but that physical play, I mean, you have the refs out there, they have to deal with it. But the 2 dirty plays that State had, the dirtiest one in that game by far was Fears when Yaks was out ahead and Fears came in. They called it a trip where, he was saying he was going after the ball, but it was it's about as dirty of a play. In hockey, you're not supposed to hit guys from behind because they can go into the boards and can kill them. In basketball, when you're up ahead and you're leaving your feet and you're going up and somebody pushes you or trip you or hit you from behind, that becomes one where it would not have been a surprise if Yaks would have gone over and punched Fears in the face. Those are the kind of plays where, if you play the game and you're going up, and I never went up for a jam or anything, but you leave your feet and somebody's undercut you. You want to grab them, you want to wring their neck. So that was just a really dirty play by Fears. But, he was going, if he didn't go for the ball at all, I might have been on the bench and left the bench and gave him a couple. But, he at least feigned going for the ball. He did get called for a flagrant. It does happen in basketball, even though it's cheap and it's dirty. It does happen in basketball. So I would put that one down. This is really dirty. But again, it happens. It's not like we've never seen that. It's not like he took a bat out and, swung it at his head or something like that. So, it was a dirty play. The other one was later on in the game where McKinney was just breaking out and he got a body check. And that one was called. I don't know, did they look at it and then give it a flagrant? So I think it was just called a personal. And then Cheddar got called for that similar type body check before that one happened. And that was a dirty play by Cheddar. A cheap play, dirty play, not as dirty as Fears, not as dirty as whoever hit McKinney, but still, I would put that in the dirty, cheap shot category. So to me, the count, Michigan State 2, U of M 1. But when you win a game like this and you're somebody like Dusty, and Dusty, he heard about during the game, there were chants. I don't know what the exact chant was by the Izzo. There were probably lots of, they were telling him F you and all this kind of stuff. And you ended up getting this great picture out of it where he was sitting there. You understand all of that, but they were also chants, something like, we keep our own, you're a hired gun, or mercenaries, homegrown, none of that has a really good ring to it. So I'm thinking that they may have been a little bit more clever than that, but you get the gist. They were chanting, we do it the right way, you do it the wrong way, basically. And Dusty didn't, he took exception to that. He even said he takes that personally. And he mentioned that, 7 years ago, you had more control over your roster. Guys could still transfer, but they had to sit out. Now guys are gone. If they don't like the situation, they're out. It's always been like that with a coach. If a coach has a better deal or something, even if he's coaching a game, he's got another team online, he'll coach and then he's out. Then they get mad when you talk about it. So it's free movement now. Everyone's a free agent. And there's a lot of people that don't like it. Now, if you're not winning, you probably don't like it. If a team doesn't have a lot of money, you don't like it. Michigan has been able to take advantage with Dusty for 2 years. He's worked that transfer portal, and he has brought players in, and they've become a team, and he's really good at it. And that's what the name of the game is right now, is being able to attract players and then bring them in the transfer portal. It's like that in football too. And we can talk about the old days and is it good for the game? Is it better for, a team? All these kind of things we could talk about, but Dusty took exception to that. He's just bringing in hired guns or mercenaries. So that's it. That's where I sit when kind of giving you all that I saw and heard today. Izzo was asked about the dirty plays, and he said there were some on both sides, and he basically said he was on the, I don't know why I said Missouri, Minnesota, their next game. He gave it a Belichick, and then he talked about hugs and kisses with Dusty and blow-by handshake, that kind of stuff. But, nothing there. So what this does do is what we talked about prior to Friday is that was going to be a game that suddenly everybody was a huge college basketball fan. Suddenly every Michigan fan, a Michigan State fan was ready with their keyboards, ready for anything that was about there to attack the other team. And Michigan won the game, so they have the upper hand. When you hear Michigan State saying anything about that game or Michigan State saying anything about you don't really listen to anything they had to say because they came out on the short end. And maybe if they're able to return the favor, maybe if they play better in the last game of the year, well, then, they'll have something to say. But right now, to the victor goes the spoils. It's been like that ever since I've watched sports. And right now, Michigan is the victor. And so they have the last say. They are the ones that came out of this, looking good. That's how I see it. Let's take some of the feedback from the people and see what they thought now that they've had the entire weekend and the coaches have weighed in on what went down. Let's start with the Michigan basketball fan, Michigan Go Blue 1324. He says Jeremy Fears tried to trip Yaxel, then push him in the back on the other play. Bothered the heck out of me. I might be thinking now, I might have to add on an additional dirty play to Michigan State. Fears, when he got called for a flagrant, Fears did, when Yax was going up and Fears said he was going for the ball, and he feigned going for the ball, but it was a really hard foul, and he got called for a flagrant. That's the one that I was calling a dirty play. I also thought that that's the one that they were calling him for tripping. Now, if he was trying to trip Yax, then that, again, would be, you'd put him dirty plays Michigan State 3 and Michigan 1. Smash the Number says, I'm the hardest working person in Michigan sports. Yeah, I don't think that is exactly true. I'm working hard. I'm thinking about it all the time, but not totally dirty. I mean, not totally a hard worker. Looking at something dirty. Cut from a different cloth is saying I called it correctly, and he's happy I did. Thank you. smash going over the entire weekend, saying that the hockey team beat Ohio State, then the basketball team, Michigan State, then a hockey team beat Ohio State again, and then MSU. I think there are just 2 OSU wins in there, but that's okay. But it was a great week. You're right about that. Smash says, put that frame of Dusty May on your wall. You know, there's photos, and then there are photos. And Tony Garcia from the Free Press snapped this picture on Friday night, and he knew when he snapped it because he indicated on Twitter that anyway it shakes out, this is going to be a memorable photo. Well, absolutely. When I saw it, yeah. And then Dusty after the game was asked about it. I liked the comments. You know, he was there at East Lansing, and it was early, still before tip off, and he peeked his head out, you know, to see what was up, you know, with the arena and all of those. How many ever? What do you say? 1,000, couple hundred. Izzo was out there, you know, and when they caught a glimpse of him, they started getting after him. And, you know, he said, well, you know, he couldn't just go duck out after that. So he decided to go in there. And then he went and sat down and you know, it took all the shouts and took that rivalry in. But then it ended up being a great picture. And it became an immediate classic. And this one will be one that will, you know, live forever. I think this photo will always be around. And it is a great photo. It's one where I know Tony had a lot of people. He was like, hey, where's my credit for my photo? And, you know, he was getting any credit for his photo. And I feel bad for the guys that there was a years ago when Stan Van Gundy was the Pistons coach. He was on his bike and he had a Tigers hat on and he had a couple of his players around him. Somebody snapped a photo. I think his name's Mulholland. He works for one of the Detroit papers. I think the Free Press. Again, I could be wrong about that. But it was a great photo and everyone used it. And I saw it. I didn't know it was from him, but he would go on Twitter all the time saying, how come you're not crediting me? And, you know, Tony's feeling a little bit is because he's seen a million people use his picture and nobody's telling him, hey, that's from Tony Garcia, the Free Press. But, you know, that's just an aside, you know, crediting somebody's photo. I know if you're, you know, you live on Twitter and you do YouTube shows or you Twitter shows, you just swipe all kinds of photos and don't credit anyone. A lot of times the excuse is you don't know who it is because nobody's putting it out there. So you just use it. And I understand that, but yeah, it's a classic photo. There were some AI generated ones. I don't know if this one is an AI generated one. One I have on the left, it's Dusty looks like he's posing for a portrait. Now that looks real to me, but he's got the state fans in the background. You're like giving him the business, but that's a great photo too. And then the AI generated one keeps the picture of Dusty with his smile and sitting on the bench, but they've put Tom Izzo crying next to him, and Dusty has his arm around him, and then he would look at the Izzo's all crying and ashamed and back. I mean, we all say a lot of mean things at times about AI. I get fed up about AI. Hey, this is pretty good. This is what AI is supposed to be used for, right? I mean, this is good AI if you're going to use it for something. I don't know how actually you do that. Just give me a lot of besides yourself, Spartan fans. Put a crying Tom Izzo next to Dusty, and then there it is. It just happens like that. I could see that getting that picture printed out and then at some point presenting it to Dusty and say, hey, Dusty, could you sign this one for me? Could you sign it 8371, January 30th, 2026? I think he would do that. I could see it happening. MGB says there was a separate play where Yaks passed the ball out to Kohler and Fears purposely tripped him by the ankle to slow down the contest. So dirty. He says he meant to say Fears passed it. So that one eluded me, but there you go. I'll take your word for it here. How about I say 2.5 dirty plays, and that 0.5 is on your recommendation. DVR says there was a forearm to the chest after a bucket 2. Yeah, there's some stuff. Big Zeke says, who cares what they say? 100. Well, yeah, right. Who cares? Right. I get it. Who cares? 4 Michigan versus Ohio State wins. Oh, I got it. You're counting there. You're going back to last week. Okay. Another one. The other angle on the left is from Getty Images, Ray Del Rio. Yeah, old Getty Images. Congratulations to Getty. Not congratulations. Photo credit to Getty Images. Actually, I heard that today. I was asking about if this was AI generated, and somebody said, no, that was Getty. So I missed it. Well, Ted Lasso vibes. I hear what you're saying on that. So Michigan has moved up to number 2 in the polls behind Arizona. The analytic where you're looking at Nat and Ken Palm, I believe they're back to number 1 in both of those now. So you're feeling good. You are feeling like you felt during that 10-game run that they had. And now you do look at the upcoming schedule, and you have Penn State. And as much as you think, well, they don't want to be looking ahead to Ohio State Super Bowl Sunday. Why would they? They almost lost to Penn State. That ended their 10-game heroic streak that they had of playing great. They won the game. So that continued, but that did touch off their 4 or 5 game stretch where they didn't look so invincible anymore. So that should have Michigan's full attention. At Ohio State, you can say, well, they were, for whatever reason, because it was Trey Burke night, they were overlooking Ohio State. I don't know. You're not going to overlook Ohio State at Ohio State on Super Bowl Sunday. I mean, I wouldn't think so. Looking ahead to the Super Bowl. No, I mean, it's a 1:00 game. Northwestern, in UCLA, Mick Cronin's prickly. So's Collins. I don't know. Maybe, the player is going to look at the coaches being prickly. No. So I'm just thinking about the look ahead factor. I don't see any of that there. So Michigan back to number 2. And there we are when it comes down to where we're sitting with basketball. Oh, I did put a couple more. Is this one in here? Oh yeah. And then this one on the right, I don't know who to this was sent to me. This is, I don't remember the original picture, but the original picture is, I think the original picture was probably fake too. I'm talking about a photo that I'm not 100% sure about, and then saying it's probably fake. But it's a headstone in a graveyard, a freshly dug grave. And then you had people standing in front of it and doing the peace sign. And then at any point, you can use it for any team. There's also the one where you've got these guys who are marching a casket through a village or something. And then folks have put, whoever picture or logo on that particular casket. That's kind of the same gist here, but you got the Michigan team all kneeling down, and taking a photo in this one. And that's, I think, good rivalry stuff when it comes down to that. What you see, you probably use those yourself. DVR set was so swanky. The only reason I don't think it was him, or I didn't know it was him, is that he usually puts a little bit of his cartoon or something in there so you can see it, so you know it's him. But I didn't have that. But if it is, give it to him. They give you 5 of them, you may as well use them. That's talking about fouls, right? Dave's here. Yeah, using 5. I think the part about the dirty plays. Look, it was Dusty who said it. You know, he credited his guys for showing restraint after some of the plays, and Michigan State plays the most physical brand of basketball in college. And that's been going on for 30 years. That's Tom Izzo. You know, when you go into the Breslin Center that it's very physical, that the officials, they have to be completely on their toes. They can get away from them like that. And yeah, sometimes you're going to cross the line. When it comes to where you feel like guys could get injured, that's where you start the dirty plays, where you take exception to that. That was also where Dusty today mentioned that he knew he needed some dogs. You can't go up to East Lansing and feel like, yeah, we're just going to play our game. Yeah, they're talking about playing physical. You got to go in there with your hard hat on. You got to know that there's going to be body shots coming, and you got to be ready to, give them back. So that's it. There are a lot of people that think that because of Izzo's style, that it has cost the Big Ten in the tournament. The refs bow down to Izzo, and they call the game during the Big Ten regular season because of the pushing and the grabbing and the physicality. They call it a certain way, and then when all these Big Ten teams get into the tournament, that's not how it's officiated. And there's a point to this, and people obsess about it, I think, too much, but there's a point to it. Then you get into the tournament, and suddenly everybody's, they're blowing the whistle nonstop, and all these Big Ten teams are like, what this is no foul. This is Big Ten basketball. And so there you go. And that's why you take 100 fans and say, why does the Big Ten haven't won a championship since State in 2000? Because of the officials. Well, because of the officials and because they placate Izzo and that style of play in the Big Ten, and then it's different in the tournament. Wouldn't you want your officials to be calling it like they would call it in the rest of college basketball? And in the tournament, that's going to help you more ultimately to win the grand prize than to play this pushing and shoving game in the Big Ten. There's a point there. There's a point to it. Again, I think it's overdone. But it's just as good of a reason or excuse why the Big Ten hasn't won a championship. What else are you going to say? You're going to say, well, the other teams have just been a lot better. Now, that's where I'm at with it. I go through, even when Michigan, when they played, not Louisville, they should have won that one. Villanova, for instance, when they last beat Michigan State in East Lansing, that was in 2018. That was a better Villanova team. Michigan, you can say, well, yeah, of course they could have, but no, Villanova was a better team. I think with Michigan State, when the Final Four was at Ford Field, I was going to all those games. Michigan State made it to the championship game. They played North Carolina. North Carolina was going to beat anybody that year. They were a way better team. I'd have to think of the other instances. Purdue, they finally get to the championship game. They had Zach Edey a couple of years there playing UConn. That was a great UConn team. UConn was better than Purdue. It wasn't because of the clutching and grabbing. The North Carolina win over Michigan State. That wasn't because of clutching and grabbing. The Villanova win over Michigan. It wasn't because of how it was officiated. Now, I know that the Louisville championship game, which Michigan was down one possession when Trey Burke pinned. Am I getting it wrong? Because 2018, the next time they played Villanova, it could be. Just Burke pinned Siva on the glass, and that was a really rough call. And that changed. You feel like Michigan was going to have a great chance to win that game, if not win it, if that didn't happen. So there it is. All right, I'll take a few more in a moment. Let me get to the other part of the things that I was talking about. And here you go for the weekend. You had the women beating Michigan State. How about putting up 94 points? 94-91. Michigan, of course, winning 83-71 on Friday. So that's nice. And, women's basketball has pushed themselves into relevancy. You may have been on board all year long and been enjoying it and telling people, hey, watch out, because people do it once in a while here. Hey, how about the women? And I've been like, oh, okay. And then there was the UConn game where they fought, tooth and nail with UConn. I watched a little bit of that and was like, damn, nice job. And, they've got two excellent WNBA players on their team. And it's continued on. But now I think that in this last month or two, I can see myself checking out these games a lot more. And it was pointed out to me last week that, okay, Super Sunday, Super Bowl's awesome. Super Bowl's the undercard this year. Michigan plays Ohio State at 1:00 on CBS. And then the Michigan women play UCLA, and that's on Fox. So both of those games are going to be available, and both of them are on Super Bowl Sunday. And then you've got the Super Bowl later on that night. That's great. That's a great Sunday. It really is. And then you have the hockey team, which is also, they are putting themselves in position where this is going to be a hell of a month. And it's going to be a hell of a tournament. Michigan is the number one team in the country. Yeah, they lost their goaltender. But the new goaltender, Stephen Beck, has been in between the pipes for 4 straight, and he's looking pretty good. He's no Ivan Kovic, but he's got such a fabulous team in front of him that, is it too early to say? I don't think they're going to march. I don't think it's going to be even these games right here, 1-goal game in overtime, 2-goal game. Hockey, just like these one and dones, I mean, it's tough, but they're the number one team in the country. And with a chance to win that first championship this century. We've been waiting for that one for the hockey team, but their offense and defense, these guys, they've got stars everywhere. And then the role players, remember, if you're old enough to remember when the Red Wings were going great, you always said, oh, the Red Wings, what makes them so great? Well, they got great players. They just roll 4 lines. They just roll them out there. Just roll the 4 lines. And anybody in Michigan hockey, now that I've been watching them this year, it's not just TJ Hughes. It's not just Horkoff. It's not just Hage. They can roll 4 lines. You might get a Shifsky or a Moldenhauer who scored the winner on Saturday night, who had his first multi-goal game of his career. That's what it takes, and that's what they've got right now. Brandon Dorado is putting these guys out there, and at the very least, this is dynamic entertainment for the rest of the way. At the best, they are in with a really good chance to win a natty. And so, don't ever say, I sound like I've seen my dad or mom never said this to me, but I've heard parents say this. Don't tell me you're bored. Don't tell me you're bored. But I sometimes say this. I said that to that sports fan today, who was like, "Yeah, there was nothing going on this weekend." I said, "What?" He's like, "Oh, I know. I heard about the basketball game. Hell, it was Illinois, Nebraska. There was what games did I watch on Saturday? BYU and Kansas, the number 1 and number 2 pick, were playing. I mean, it was just dynamite all day long. Really. You can only watch so many games. People act like they watch 10, 15 games, but you get a 1 o'clock window, you get a 4, 6 o'clock. Well, you're doing pretty good. This guy was telling me that there's this excellent pseudo sports movie about table tennis. He was selling it to me. He said it was pretty good. I said, well, when I get to June or something, I'll check it out. Now, if it came out before that, I'm still watching a couple things. I'm watching, what am I watching? Landman. I watch a little bit of that. I watched the final season, at least for a few years, of Stranger Things, and I found that pretty interesting. It was, over the years, I liked it because I knew that it was from my era. In my era, the kids, kind of a kiddie drama horror series, if you're trying to classify it as something, but it's geared more towards, I'd say, teenagers, but that doesn't mean you can't enjoy it if you're older. But they end up in the end, I'm not giving you any spoilers, don't worry if that's something that you're concerned about, but they graduate in 1989. And when I saw that, I said, you know what? I knew that I graduated in 1988. So it was all of the things that you watch there. They got a bag of Doritos. You're like, oh, I remember those Doritos. They got the, cassette tapes that they're rolling out. I'm like, this is how people must have felt by watching Back to the Future when they were going back, and Biff, oh, yeah, that was nice. I had a car like that. You'd hear people say, I had a car like that. I remember when the girls wore jeans like that. But I have to say this about that show because it's fresh on my mind. That was a good finale. However, whether you think it's a kiddo show, it lost its way, it was confusing, whatever you think about it, that was a hell of an ending. If you're going to be a series, that's the one thing about The Sopranos. People hated, man, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to have a great ending. It wasn't a great ending. It was like the greatest show, but it wasn't the great ending. Stranger Things, great ending. I'm not putting it up there with The Sopranos. I'm just saying Sopranos is looked at as it's my second favorite. My favorite, and why I put it just over The Wire, is because it had a great ending. The Wire had a great ending. You had my man going back on the corner and getting a taste of it. I mean, it was as good as you can get. But I'll give it up to the brothers, Duffners, I think they're called. The kiddie show, drama, horror. Nice job in finishing that up. All right. So there you go. And then if speaking of the entertainment value for hockey, just for one more second, I'm just looking at the schedule. It says it's going to be a great month. It's going to be a great week, just looking ahead. I already mentioned Super Bowl Sunday, where the men play at 1 and the women play at 3, both of those on national TV, so you'll be able to take both of those in. On Friday, Michigan to Michigan State at Yost, that is on FS1. And then on Saturday, the duel in the D, when they go down to the LCA, that is going to be on the Big Ten Network. So that is all there for you. Don't you dare. Don't say you don't have anything to do Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, because you got something to do all 3 days. Those are 3 great days. Now, I'm just going to take these days one at a time. You say, I can't wait till Friday. I'm looking forward to Friday, but I can wait. But those games against Michigan State will be awesome in hockey. How about that? All right, let's wrap this up with more feedback from the folks. See what people are saying. The punters says Dusty is obviously cheating. He's the chief cheater on a team of cheaters. Send them all to cheaters' prison. Great win on Friday. I thought that somebody had hijacked the punters' feedback. MSU are poor sports from coaching to the players. What am I going to sit around and say that's not true? Say like the Jail Blazers and the Bad Boys back in the day. You know, it reminds me a little bit when you think about a dirty team. I love the Bad Boys, and I used to think that and I knew they were. You know, I used to not say they were dirty. But to me, it was more like, okay, they'll fight you, they'll push you, and they're square up to you, but they're not undercutting you on the way to the basket. That to me, that was always my thing. I hated that. I could bump and grind out there playing. I like the physicality of basketball, but I was not, taking somebody's leg out when they're going. No cheap shots that way. Yeah, you want to fight. You don't like how I reach in and slap the ball. You're a little bit. All those kind of things. Let's go. We can settle it another way. But so I would say all of that, and then I got outside the state of Michigan and ran into other NBA fans, and I would start saying, no, they just play hard. Everybody's like, you're nuts. And then I had to start watching it, and I would see some of the videos, and I'd be like, oh, that was pretty dirty. Ooh, Rodman actually undercut him and threw him into the stands. That is pretty dirty. It was a pretty cheap shot. It's funny how when it's your team and you don't think about being cheap. I don't think any state fan thinks that anything. They're probably like, oh, those guys are being soft. It's hard when that's your team to say that somebody's cheap. The Pistons had some cheap shots in there after all these years, but it took me, I don't know, a decade or so to both admit it and then just watch it and say, yeah, boy, what I was watching was not what actually really happened. Brandon is going to the fans. He says, I'll tell you what, Michigan State is in for a rude awakening when Izzo finally retires. Yeah, I agree with that part. I had mentioned on Friday that the green and white smoke show on 97.1 was making a point. I didn't listen to it, but I saw a clip of Valente, bagging on Michigan fans, like, oh, now you guys are big fans when the team's good. And I felt like saying, oh, just wait, just wait till you state fans. Is that, the point about Michigan, they don't fill up the stadium. Now they're bandwagon. Now everyone's going. Now it's basketball and everybody likes it. True. But the thing about it is when that shoe's on the other foot and State goes into the tank after Izzo's gone, believe me, all these great Michigan State basketball fans, they're not going to be showing up to the Breslin Center. The place is going to be empty. Just like it is on the football stadium every other year. Are they not great football fans? No, this team sucks. Nobody wants to spend all day and all that money to go watch a terrible football team. And if you're not bringing it nowadays and entertainment, you can only lean on the old, hey, you went to school, those school pride for so long. Yeah, once in a while, people will be like, yeah, let's go to a tailgate. We'll show up. Sure, great to see old friends, but not nowadays. Not when I'm talking about all these TV shows and everything else going on. It's a lot more entertaining than watching, bad basketball or bad football. Speaking of the Pistons, Smash says, are the Pistons going to make a trade before the deadline? Michael Porter Jr. from the Nets. What is going to happen with the Scooble arbitration on Wednesday? Big week. Yes, I think the Pistons are in need of a shooter. I like Porter Jr. I am partial to a player that's available. It's a little bit of uh, a guy that I both think will help, and I'm just a fan of from when he was young. Is Malik Monk. Now Malik Monk is from Jonesboro, Arkansas, where my dad lived. And he would get his newspaper back in the day when Monk was in high school, and he had heard about him, and people talked about Monk like he's just the greatest. And my dad would talk about Monk, and then Monk didn't go to Arkansas, which everybody wanted him to. He went to Kentucky, but he's a player that I followed, and I think he would help the Pistons. But I think Porter Jr. would as well. There's a lot of other names. You see 100 names being mentioned. I'm not trading Asar Thompson unless it's for a superstar. I see him, put into some of these moves for like the Pelicans, and these guys are fine players, but I'm not throwing Asar Thompson's ceiling. He hasn't hit it yet. And this guy, I don't know about him being a superstar, perennial all-star, but he is a star. You better get a superstar. So I'm only trading Asar if it's something like, and I know they're not trading for Giannis, but it has to be a player like that. But yeah, I'm down for a trade. And with Skubal, he'll get awarded. What's the argument for the Tigers? That's the whole thing when you have arbitration. Their Tigers have their number, Skubal has theirs, and then the Tigers have to say, okay, well, yeah, we didn't really think he was all that good. We didn't think he could really he didn't fight it and pitch well after the seventh inning, or he begged out of the seventh inning, or as soon as he got 100 pitches, he's out. He's going to get the money. I'll bet on, you probably can bet. I'll bet that Skubal wins and the Tigers lose in arbitration. Can't believe we lost to UCLA. Are we talking about basketball 4 years ago in the tournament? That was an excellent game. Michigan had at least 3 shots to go to the Final Four. They had Franz Wagner. If you'd have said, Franz, you can shoot a 3 from anywhere on the court to go to the Final Four, where would you pick? He would pick the spot that he shot from. A little bit left of the top of the key, wide open, almost too wide open, and he airmailed it. And then there was at least 2 more shots. Now, they weren't as perfect, a little bit rushed, guys coming at him, but they definitely were shots. They weren't just prayers to go to the Final Four. I think that's what you're talking about. Brandon looking at the upcoming schedule and calls it a gauntlet at Illinois, at Purdue, and at Duke. Yes. It is it's an excellent schedule. It's true. It is a gauntlet. Duke is not an exhibition game. That is not the way I'm looking at it. That is not the way Michigan's looking at it. And I don't think any fan is looking at it that way either. It's an exhibition game is one that they played at the beginning of the year against Cincinnati and St. John's. Those didn't count towards the standings. Duke, who is, what do they rank, 3 or 4 in the country? When you play the number 4 team in the country in February and you're the number 2 team in the country, that is what's called, scratch what you're saying there, extra credit. No, that is called a litmus test on who is going to be favored to get the number 1 overall seed. And if you're in that selection committee, besides just, sucking down a lot of, champagne and eating a lot of shrimp cocktail, which, I like all that stuff myself. I would love to be on the committee. When you have a win over Duke, you get forward to the selection committee. When you're talking about being the number 1 overall seed, I guess if Arizona loses, if Arizona goes undefeated, they'll get the number 1 overall seed. But no, there's nothing less true then this is the least true feedback that you have ever sent. Ever. Take it back. Brandon says the women are legit title contenders too. Is that true? I have to get up to speed. I have to admit that I was downstairs looking through some old clothes, and I did come across my women's basketball jacket 20 years ago. I might have to pull that out. Fears is looking for fouls first, scoring second. Izzo teaches that. Well, there's nothing wrong for hunting fouls and getting to the line. Really, there's nothing wrong with that. But he's the opponent, so trying to say nice things about Fears, nobody really wants to hear that. And, you're saying Izzo teaches that. Again, looking for fouls, I'd say this. The one that Mara got caught on where Fears was dribbling and kind of veered into him, and Mara smashed into him, and they're like, foul on Mara, and everybody's like, that's dirty. That actually was a high-level basketball. It's a technique. It's nuanced. It forces the referees a whistle. People might not be familiar with that, but and Fears did lean in a little bit. But when you're the aggressor in basketball, more times than not, you are going to get a favorable whistle. If Izzo teaches that, which I think he does, that's smart. Punch first kind of mentality. It's where you drive. It was in the Nebraska game. Cornhusker fans were upset that their guard, who was standing there on the baseline, Hoiberg, didn't get the charging call on Trey McKinney, the biggest basket of the game. And if you watch it, you say, boy, his feet look like they were down. They're outside. And he did look like he was set for a second. So you could make the case there. But McKinney, the offensive player, the aggressor, going up for the layup, he has a right to get in there too. It was very difficult. It could have gone either way. I'll give him that. And when you have plays that can go either way, the aggressor, more times than not, is going to get that call. You know that if you're a sports fan. Now, if it's your team against the other team, it boggles your mind, and you're always like, no, that's good call for us. Bad call for them. Or, and if it goes the other way, they're terrible refs. But but you understand after the fact that you can step back and look at that. But the Fears one where he hits the break, I had a guy in two separate games a long time ago. I was playing in this league. And if I saw a guy dribbling ahead, I'd like to go up, tap the ball from behind. You've seen that kind of stuff before. Well, I was going up and I was going to do it to this guy, and he slammed on the brakes, and I smashed into him. And the guy's like, foul on me. And I'm like, that dirty. And then he did it again the next game. I'm over there, and he, kind of went over, and then he slammed on the brakes, and I smashed into him again. 2 fouls. And I said, are you kidding? So guess what? I was dribbling a few times, and I would get somebody that was getting behind me, and I'd get in front of them, and I would stop, and they would bang into me, smash into me. And I look up, and they're calling the foul on the defensive player. And I thought, you know what? You think about doing it, you are initiating it, and you're just forcing. The referee has to call something. And what's he going to say? You know what? You knew that guy was trailing you, and you totally stopped because you knew he was going to run into you then. I've never seen. Now, the call, people don't do it a lot. And Fears did. It was close to, because you can see him almost jumping into him. But that's an old school finesse move when it comes down to it. Stephen Peck. BK says, since 98, this has to be the year they've been knocking on the door the last 4 years. They've been knocking on the doors a lot of other times, too. I mean, they've been a lot of Frozen Fours. What was that championship game? Normally, the officials and everything, but the officials, I believe it was against Minnesota. The call that I hate in hockey the most is when I don't know, it's a linesman or whatever they are. They blow the whistle when they lose sight of the puck. They come up with that one. Now, lost sight of the puck, we blew the whistle. And the officials always say, well, it's for the safety of the players. That's what they say. And, it's probably rooted in some truth there where, you understand that. But I don't know how many times. And for that one, when you watch the replay, there's the puck he lost sight of the play because it was between the legs and it was still traveling right through the 5-hole, right through the pearly gates of this Gopher goaltender. Sure, there was a scrum out front. The whistle blows, the puck's behind him already. And then they're like, no, lost sight of the puck. That would have been a natty, I think. I think that was in the finals. It could have been in the Frozen Four, but I think the Wings against the Ducks one year had old lost sight of the puck type deal where they ended up losing a game too. Jester says, did I see that Jean-Marie is going to coach the linebackers for the Irish? No, I did not. That's news to me, but it's not a surprise that Brian Jean-Marie landed on his feet with another team as a coach. I mean, he did a good job at Michigan. Michigan had a strong linebacker room last year. He did I know a lot of Michigan fans used to say, he's not that good of a recruiter, but he recruited Taylor and Owasso Boateng. Both of those guys are pretty good. Was he in on the Sullivan recruitment? I think so. I thought he was doing a pretty good job in terms of recruiting. Maybe this upcoming year, they lost one, and then however it was, he just had that knock, which I don't think was true. So I always thought he was a little bit better coach than Michigan. A lot of Michigan fans, the chatter that I saw, that kind of stuff. This is an interesting one that says, I feel a great Roddy Game Jr. game is coming up soon. So for 4 or 5 games, Gale has looked more like he did all of last year with the exception of that 26-point tournament game than he did the first 15 games, where Dusty was said at one point that he was the best 6th man in the country. He's a tough player because when he turns it over, I don't think I've ever seen a player. I haven't. I don't want to say I think. I've never seen a player look worse turning the ball over than Gale. He looks like he's blindfolded. He looks like he's colorblind. He looks like they've just spun him around and pinned a tail on the donkey. He'll jump and he'll throw it. He just throws it up in the air. He'll throw it to anybody. I hate it. And his turnovers are so deflating. They say sometimes like Cohen Carr from Michigan State, he dunks. That's worth more than 2 points because he gets – I think the Gale turnovers are like -5 because everybody's just like, are you kidding? However, that's the bad stuff. He's a good defender. He draws a lot of fouls. Those are a couple things that he's able to do. Michigan, I didn't think he played well on Friday, and yet you look at the box score, and he was +12. So, to me, he's somebody that they're going to need to win a championship. But you can't count on him every game, and that's where the coaching comes in. I asked Dusty today I wanted to just see what he was going to say about 3 different players. Namari Burnett, who missed a lot of the second half, but he said he's fine. He's good to go. McKinney, who everybody loves right now for good reason. And then Gale. And they're all 6'4", 6'5". I think Gale's 6'5". Burnett's 6'5". So McKinney, I think, is listed 6'4". So they're all about the same height. I asked him what each of those guys brought to the table defensively, and he just went on and on and on. But the one part that he said is that he's bringing guys in and they all want to play 25 plus minutes, but the truth is how they're playing in a game, it's going to be between, I think he said 14 and 26. I would even say it might be between, 10 and, 25 if I was going to guess on that. But those were his numbers. And I'm actually saying I don't even know for sure. But Gale, that's the coach. Burnett's starting. He's been around the block. Even if he's not the best out of those three, you could make the case that McKinney is. But you've got this chemistry in what they're doing. And if Burnett's not lighting it up, well, you know what? Gale will, not Gale, maybe Gale, but McKinney will take his minutes. And then Gale, if he's running around with a chicken with his head cut off, well, he's going to see limited minutes. But there's still some value there. And that's where this whole mercenary and team talk, he said, these guys get it. They understand that they're sacrificing. They could have gone somewhere else to get a lot more minutes and scored a lot more points, but they're trying to do something special here. Yeah, and Gale's going to have – I still feel like Cheddar was all right on Friday. I still think there's going to be a Cheddar game. And, yeah, hopefully there's more than one Gale Junior game. Nobody's forgetting MSU basketball. Let's be on time, LFG. That's all we've talked about are the women's team and the men's team and the great weekend. So you're barking up the wrong tree here. That's what happens when you skip back and forth between all these different podcasts and what you're doing. You're not paying attention. Jester's Jinx will be at the duel in the D. I've got a challenge to anyone out there. There's the play-by-play man for Michigan football's name is Doug Karsh. And Doug, a long time ago, I went to, it wasn't called the duel. I think it was a GLI, but we had a suite for Michigan State. And, Doug's got everything all planned out. He's got the suite tickets, and we're sitting not in the front row of the suite, but the second row of the suite, but we are not going to take our seats until right when the pucks drop. We're going to be in the suite, and we're going to be taking advantage of the buffet, and we're going to be taking advantage of the free beer. Truthfully, it was a lot more of the last than it was the former. But so Doug fills up he had as big a beer as you could possibly get. These like gigantic, I don't know, probably a 40-ounce beer. It was filled so much to the top. And he's got two. And I got two, and we're going to sit down. And it was all Doug. I'm surprised because I would have thought maybe that, it's not like I'm not clumsy sometimes, but I sit down and something happens where Doug takes both of his beers and he pours them. He didn't mean to. He got bumped. And he poured it all over these people in the front row. But to be specific, there was a guy with his date. And the guy, I don't think got any beer on him. But the girl, 2 40-ounce beers, woo, all over, complete. Took it down right when the game started. There's nothing you could do. Doug could say he's sorry. He did. I think he went to get him some napkins. I think he offered to pay, for a shirt. I don't remember whatever else. But going down for the duel in the D for a Michigan State game always reminds me of Doug pouring 2 beers directly on this girl. And the guy that was with him, I mean, what's he going to do? Stand up and be like, he wanted to fight. It would be nicer if I could say he was a State fan, but I'm not sure he was. I don't know that. But it sucked for him. And my challenge is if anybody ever sees him, you go ahead and say that. Give him that story. Ferris is talking about Bad Bunny. Well, I did notice. Now, I DVR'd what my daughter used to call the Grannies, the Grammys last night, and actually watched the first 2 or 3 minutes, and it was going pretty good. I thought, this is pretty good. And then I don't remember what happened. Whatever I was doing, I flipped off. But I noticed this morning that the best album was none other than Bad Bunny. Jesters is wanting to talk about the internet Michigan State guy Spyro, that he was caught cheating in his fantasy league. Yeah, I'll leave that out there. I mean, the guys like the Spyros and the like Scott Bells, like the trolls for the different fan bases and everything else. I just leave. I'm not really into. I'm not really into all of that. So the best thing that what I do is pretty much ignore that. And so I'm not adding to that. Spyro. I'll leave that for the internet, for the rest of the internet. It was weird seeing Sadi Washington in the green and white. It was weird. I always liked Sadi. You know what else was weird? Is Curtis Townsend has been on Bill Self's staff for, I don't know, 20, 25, whatever he is. But before he was at Kansas, he was on Ellerby's staff at Michigan. And Townsend, Curtis Townsend I was cool with Curtis Townsend. We would talk, and I liked him. Great person. I can see why he'd be a great recruiter and everything else. Very personable guy. So the first couple of years I would see Curtis, and I always be like, man, it's weird seeing him with Kansas. But then after 25 years, I still see him. And then I'm sad, and I'm like, man, Curtis still going. Still happening. JJ talking about if we lose to Duke, like we did to Cincy, should we be worried about the tourney? Well, if they lose to Duke like they did to Cincy, wasn't that game pretty close? If they lose a close game to Duke, I'm not going to be worried about the tourney. Now, for a 4 or 5 game stretch, I was watching all these. This is a great year for college basketball. Michigan being in it makes it even a greater year because when your team is in it, then you're into all of the other teams. It goes like that, really, with any sport that I'm watching. Really enjoying the NBA right now. Really enjoying the NHL. I like the Wings and the Pistons. They're doing really well. I like college basketball. Michigan's in it. So, everything's going awesome. But the 4 or 5 game stretch, I'd see, I was like, man, that team's good. That team's good. There's a lot of good teams. So, but my faith is been restored. I feel like I did during that 10-game buzzsaw right now. That's what a win over Nebraska and Michigan State could do. So, yeah, talking about being worried I'm worried if I get a flat tire. I'm not worried about Duke. I want to see the Fab Five give their impressions of the Duke Blue Devils. Soft. Pretty boys. Bitches. The original comes in late, always with some wise words. He says, U of M beats Illinois, Duke, and Purdue. It will be tough. Whoa. I'm going to tell you this right now. If Michigan beats Illinois, Duke, and Purdue, I'm going to be handing them the championship. I'm going to. You got to buy tickets then. Give me 2 out of 3. Smash would lose to Duke right now. It doesn't work like that, but I don't think I would. I would not either. Maybe in the right, if I could pick the Big Ten game, if I could lose to Duke and I could see at the end, and then I could pick the game. But I mean, what are we talking about? Beating a top 5 Duke team is going to do more for your confidence than beating any other Big Ten team out there. D Original has been checking out the women's team. Here's a little, and people like calling them the Lady Wolfies or whatever. They don't like that. So if you like women's basketball, it's great. But what the Michigan women's team doesn't like they don't like to be called the Lady Wolverines They like to be called the Michigan women's basketball team. But, you can say, what do you, don't worry about it. And I generally don't worry about it. I was just giving you a heads up. That's what they like. So if that could be something that, you could add to your repertoire out there. Finally, the NRS is in the house. Now, if the NRS was around on Friday, I had this with me, and I was ready to fill it up on Friday night. I was just waiting to fill this thing up. But it never happened. It might have got too late. They might have locked down computer privileges, after 10 o'clock. Might get shut down. Could happen. The original says, I just think U of M, they don't have enough three-point shooting to space the floor. Yaks and Cadeau hit a three, but not true shooters. Well, they just have come back and hit some big threes. But if Yaks is shooting threes, he at a clip closer to 40% than 30, then I think he's going to be the National Player of the Year. If Cadeau is shooting better threes, if he's shooting closer to 40% than 30%, then he's going to be all Big Ten. So if both of these guys are shooting, you're going to have a National Player of the Year, you're going to have an all Big Ten point guard, and you're going to be a team that gets to the Final Four and wins the championship. So you're saying that they might – I think that I understand what you're saying. I still think that they can win a national championship with I think Trey McKinney's getting better at shooting threes. We saw what Gale was able to do during the tournament with, Cheddar shooting. And really, this team's strength is their front line and their ability to play defense and their versatility and their overall defense. That's the strength. So then you start getting to, okay, before it was the free throw, but, 3-point shooting. They go cold from the 3-point lane, they can lose. You're not getting any loot. Just remember back in the day, I had a fade. Guys like shooting Skelly. I don't know, however, I don't even know what Skelly is, so I better watch it. Give me the loot. You either were slinging rock or had a wicked jump shot. Isn't that what it was, Rip? Back in the day? That's what people, back in the day, they used to fight, but now they blast. Wait. All right. Yeah. Smash. We'll take a few more here. LFG, who must have just got off work or he's on his lunch break. He's going to say, hey, why aren't you talking about the Michigan hockey team? Is that going to be next? Look at the resumes, and Michigan basketball should be number one with the hockey team. Well, this is an old bit, I've looked at the resumes. The one thing that stands out with Arizona is they haven't lost a game. So if I was voting, and this is the tough part, maybe for you and Michigan fans, you say, and this is where's my one guy going to be and say, oh, you're negative. If I had a vote for the College Basketball Associated Press poll, my number one team would be Arizona. Number two team would be Michigan. But I would have Arizona as number one. They're undefeated. If LFG Blue was voting in the AP poll, you could work for Michigan. You big Michigan guy, big Michigan fan, and that's what people want anyways. And that's what people would want. They want vote Michigan number one. Let me ask you this. The media is a bunch of clowns and everything else, LFG. How many first place votes did Michigan get in the AP poll where they were ranked number 2 today? Let's just take a look. There are 59 voters. How many votes Out of all 50, and I know the media, they're a bunch of clowns. They're a bunch of jerks. They're on the tape. I mean, say whatever you want about them. 59 voters. You know how many people voted for Michigan? Or UConn or Duke? 0. All 59 voters voted for Arizona. All 59. So it's not. Maybe say what other podcast? Save this one maybe for I don't know who's the biggest. There's a lot of homers. Save that one up there. But then come on. Come on. Come on now. I want a latte. We're talking about, can we play Winters Grady at least 5 minutes one game? Grady was playing, then he got banged up. When do you want to play him? In a one-score game against Nebraska? And you want to put him in the last couple of minutes against Michigan State? I mean, it happens. Now we're in my wheelhouse. We're going to Black Diesel Coffee in Ann Arbor. Great coffee. I'm a big coffee fan. I've never heard of Black Diesel Coffee. I switch it around, but the last bag of coffee I've got was from called Roadhouse Joe. Let's drink that black, grind it up, put that in the percolator. You drink that, you can sit around all day drinking that. All day. I mean, you drink that, you drink one, you can't just drink one cup. You can't just drink two. It just keeps going. It happens. Nobody's asking about Grady's injury. He had one, and they've been playing tough games, so they haven't had a chance to put him in. That's the one thing when you're not winning by 40 anymore, you can't just play everyone. You play 10 deep. Maybe against Penn State. Penn State, I know they played them close. They played other teams close, but maybe they can get up by 20. You'll see Winters Grady. I go to the news conferences. You know why I don't ask about Grady Winters? Because they're playing close games, and he's the 11th man off the bench. I asked about Burnett. Black Diesel Coffee right on Stadium. Is that right at Stadium in Maine, that coffee shop? That's what we're talking about? I see it. I passed it today. What about Roadhouse Joe? Yes, Doug is shoot the boot. He is a shoot the boot guy, which is crazy because that would be the nastiest thing ever. Doug would never do that. He hates there's somebody like put on his shoe, or Doug's one of those guys. He's got I don't know, let's call it a shoe fetish, but let's say it. I've heard him say that if he goes to a shoe store, you get your shoes and they bring out the box and they hold it up. And if it looks like somebody has worn that, he wants them not. They don't want them laced up. They've got to never be worn. If they pull it out and it looks like it's up, and he's going to be like, "Can you get another pair in there?" And nobody's ever. I get that. It's a little bit. Does anybody else do that? Last pair I got, actually, I looked. I thought about Doug, and I thought, I'm going to get them. They look fine. I'm not going to be like Doug. Bad Bunny is solid. Oh, I can't wait. There's a second Bad Bunny. Yep. Not talking about him. Bad Bunny. I think about maybe I'm gearing up for the Super Bowl. Should I get my Super Bowl story? What the hell? We're going real long here. I play in a postseason fantasy league. Get 15. I don't know. There's 20 of us in it. You get to pick players and everything. But the long story short now is that I am in third place. But I trail second place by 1 point and first place by 4 points. And all of their players are gone. And I have the same ones. Nobody has Ramondre Stevenson except me. That can win and beat me. So I need Ramondre Stevenson to have 4 points. 40 yards rushing, 20 yards rushing, 20 yards passing, something like that. That's all I need. That sounds so easy. I hedged and took him under 48.5. So I am hoping that he doesn't. I'm hoping I can hit all sides. But Super Bowl, I like to play. You play a couple different angles. So what the Super Bowl is gearing up for me is that everything to do with Ramondre Stevenson. And then I've waited. That's all I've got is the Ramondre stuff. And then Sunday, I'll put a couple things around. But I'm thinking that maybe I should just keep going everything on Ramondre, maybe. But again, I don't want him to go crazy running because I hedged and I could take all sides. Now, here's my question to Michigan fans. I had JSN on my fantasy league team in the regular season, and he was great. And I've had him in the postseason. Obviously, he's been great. I saw that his MVP odds, it was 1,100, plus 1,100. It seemed pretty long odds. I know the quarterbacks mostly win it, but he seems like the kind of guy that K9 could win it, JSN. So you got a Spartan and K9, and then JSN, the Buckeye. What do you stay away saying, I don't want to put any money. I don't want to root for these guys. Bunch of Spartans and Buckeyes. Screw that. See, now I don't think that's hardcore. I get it, but I gotta stay away from that. Yeah, that was disappointing. Dan Campbell's daughter goes to Michigan State, but I was hoping that he's going to have a state hat on, and at some point he's going to pull a Michigan hat on. But the Fab Five never beat Duke. It's true. I have for 1 year, so it would have been the first year, I think, Michigan played the Fab Five. And I had a tape sent to me. And I had no access to TV except the British broadcasting system, 4 channels. And the only thing I had was this tape, Fab Five versus Duke. Michigan had a shot at the buzzer, a long one, to win it. I probably watched that tape. It's 20 times. Well, it's all you've got. It'd be like Rip, down. You can't. If you don't have the TV, you just have to, you take what you can get, right? NRS says he is 12. You're 12. You're too young for this shit. No, you're not. I can tell by the way you're right. You're not 12. This is correct about this. Thank you. I like some Roadhouse Joe too. Here we've got Shim. Congratulations to Michigan fans. U of M has a really good team. There you go, Shim. Is Shim Co? I know a Shim. Could be a State fan. Shim, good luck against Minnesota. Zingerman's versus Ruse Roast, sorry. Both are good. I like that lobster butter from Ruse Roast. Actually, I was driving with my wife a couple of weeks ago in Ann Arbor, and I looked over, and it said Ruse Roast. I said, what is that? She said, it's a coffee shop. I said, let's go on a date there. Ooh. I don't recommend Black Diesel. Uh-oh. Right at Stadium and Packard on the corner across from the gas station and the Chase Bank. All right. I know where that's at. One at the stadium is Drip House, owned by a former player. I didn't know that either. I do know that used to be a party store way back in the day, and that you could bring beer into Michigan Stadium. You could bring a keg into Michigan Stadium. So people at halftime would leave the stadium, go over to the party store, get as many beers as they could, maybe a keg. I guess if you had the keg, you wouldn't be leaving at halftime. You would just sit up there. You imagine? I mean, that's so different. That's when they're like, we're going to start selling beer. People are like, oh, they're just out for the money. It's true. They are. Everybody's out for money. But you had people that were old enough, like, we used to sit in there with a keg and go across the street, buy beer. That's it. Handlebars like Coy Detmer. It's so. I don't know. I might be able to do it and get it going now pretty quick. Yeah, I don't like iced coffee. It's not. I don't like cream in coffee either. You and I, for somebody that's 12 years old, you drink a lot of coffee. Drink a lot of coffee and whatever, and know about the cartel. Coy loves skiing. Well, I mean, I think if you're in Colorado, you probably like skiing, right? That's it. Okay, that's going to do it. Here's the good news. Go to the Maize and Blue Review and join up. Don't join if you like constant Michigan talk. You know, if you hate me being on there talking Michigan, don't join up with the Maize and Blue Review. Although you could just ignore me. I mean, it says, a thread that I'd have or any stories that I write. A lot of Michigan fans over there talking basketball all the time. Of course, talking football, recruiting, women's basketball, hockey. If you don't like any of that stuff, don't join up. But if you like all that stuff and want to take your Michigan fandom to the next level, well, that's where the Maize and Blue Review comes in. Join up. It's great. Costs you a cup of coffee a day. I mean, what are we talking about here? Less than a cup of coffee a day. Join up with the Maize and Blue Review. We'll see you over there. Thank you for joining us. Talk with you on Wednesday. Let's go.